So good evening, everyone. I'm Samuel Cormier, and I have a question to ask you before we start. What do all these people have in common? I really need some audience participation here, so just raise your hand or just start talking. What do these people have in common? Yes?
They're handsome.
They're handsome. I always get this answer. Okay, what else? Yes?
They're male.
They're male. That's a really good observation. Yes?
They're actors.
They're actors. Thank you very much. Absolutely. Anything else? Yes. Oh, yeah. Sorry.
Do you think like transgender characters?
Oh my God, I didn't think I would get it tonight. All right, that's it. There you go. You have it. All of these cisgender male actors have played transgender female characters in movies or TV shows. Now, we may wonder why they were casted that way. But let's have a little vocab check. Maybe I'm getting a bit ahead of myself. Some people in this room might not know the words. So cisgender is someone whose gender identity fits their sex, their anatomical body. A transgender person is someone whose gender does not fit their sex. More specifically, a non-binary person is someone whose gender is not really male or female, kind of in the middle, or neither, or both. And finally, transitioning is the personal, social, legal, medical process for which a transgender person becomes their true selves. It's worth noting that some transgender people do not medically transition. So what is representation and why does it matter? Representation simply can mean seeing people like you in media, on TV, in movies, in books. Like you can mean, male or female, simply. It can also mean your skin color, your ethnicity. It can also mean your age group. But more specifically, when it comes to transgender people, about 0.6% of the population, the world population, is transgender, which means that over 1 in 200 people you see on TV should be transgender. Now, are we there? I do not think so. So there is a need to compensate for years of transgender people not being represented accurately or enough in media. Representation matters because it's a way to educate others on the hardship that some minorities may face. It's also important for the minority individuals themselves so that they can feel seen, feel validated, especially for the youth. Now let's have a quick rundown of trans identity history since 2000. So one of the main people about trans identity is a transgender actress, Laverne Cox, who has been active since 2000. She transitioned before her career started, and since then she has won many, many awards. She was the first Black transgender woman to win a bunch of awards. Then there's the Wachowski sisters, who have made the movie Matrix. You probably know about this. They both transitioned after the first Matrix movie came out. Lana Wachowski came out in 2008, and Lily Wachowski came out in 2016. Then we have, of course, Caitlyn Jenner, that I think a lot of you would know. Caitlyn Jenner is very interesting because she was well known before she transitioned. She had a career as an athlete and as a reality TV celebrity. And her transition was highly mediatized, which is really important for representation, for people to know what is it like to transition, even if I don't want to. It's good to see it. And finally, the Danish Girl. We already seen the main character on my slides up there earlier. It's actually a pretty good movie because it wasn't made targeted for LGBTQ plus people. It was made for any type of audience. So I think a lot of people went and saw that movie and saw about something they'd never seen before, which is trans identity, especially the personal process for which Lily discovers that she's transgender and also her medical transition. But now, the cast is iffy, and also they revisited a lot of things, took a lot of shortcuts, which leads us to the question, who should play transgender characters in movies and TV shows? I want to advocate for both sides of the debate so that you can make your own opinion. So some people think that any actor should be able to play a transgender character. Some of the arguments that go in this direction is that an actor is an actor. If they're good, they can play anyone. Another argument is that maybe transgender actors don't want to play transgender characters because it's too reductive. They don't want to be confined to this. And finally, some cisgender actors have played roles of the opposite sex or opposite gender before without any mention of trans identity. For example, Glenn Close played a parrot in Hook. Kate Blanchett played Bob Dylan in a biopic movie. Thank you very much. Tilda Swinton played a male character in Suspiria. And finally, John Travolta played woman in the 2007 remake of Hairspray. Now, some people think that only transgender actors should be able to play transgender characters. Some of the arguments that go in this direction is that there's a job scarcity for transgender actors. That's just a fact. So they think that at least transgender roles should be reserved for them. As well, where do we draw the line at who can play who? Maybe a straight man can play a gay man. I think not a lot of people would have trouble with that. Can a man play a woman character? Can a white actor play a black character? So where can we draw the line? And finally, as I said already, there's a need for accurate trans representation now. A couple of roles have done this in the past. Laverne Cox played Sophia Bursett in the show Orange is the New Black. Non-binary actor Garcia played a character named Jake in Tales of the City, and of course, a very famous Euphoria. Hunter Schafer played a transgender character in Euphoria. I have some additional remarks on this topic. First of all, in any case, no matter who you cast, it's very important to have consulting matters so much. For example, in The Danish Girl, Eddie Redmayne and Alicia Vikander, who are the main actors, were asked to meet up with couples where at least one of the two partners was transgender and have discussions with them just to see like how was it, how is it. And I think that this is great method acting. It's great. It's really important to have consulting in the pre-production process and on set if you want to have transgender characters. But then we need to wonder about choosing, if you're going to cast a cisgender actor, do you cast a cisgender male or a cisgender female to play a transgender female character? Do you want to focus on their life, on the character's life before the transition, while the transition, or after? And a lot of other choices, a lot of other criteria can come into play. And finally, a little nudge never hurt nobody. The Academy Awards have set up minority requirements for any movie to be considered for Best Picture. So at least 2 of the 4 criteria need to be filled. Having minority storylines, having minority actors, having minority crew, or offering internship opportunity to minorities. Needs to have at least 2 of these things to be even considered for Best Picture. Now you may have noticed that so far I've mainly talked about women, right? Transgender women characters or transgender women actresses. Well, it's because there's an uneven representation. I compiled some Wikipedia lists of books, movies, video games, anything you can think about post-2000, and I found that there were 12 non-binary characters, 50 transgender male characters, and a whopping 164 transgender female characters. So clearly there's an uneven representation because, so for transgender male representation, there's actually some bright days ahead, I believe, because in the past couple of years, 1 role in cinema and 2 coming out may seem that it's going in the right direction. Actor Zach Baird, who is openly transgender, played one of Peter Parker's friend in Spider-Man Far From Home. Michael Cohen, who is a Nickelodeon star, revealed recently that he transitioned way back before his career started. And of course, Elliot Page recently came out as a transgender man after having a long career as an actress. And I believe that his career will still continue on. And I think that his story is quite similar to that of Caitlyn Jenner. So I'm excited to see how this will open up opportunities for transgender male actors in the future. Also, thus far, I've only really talked about movies and TV shows, but there are many, many forms of media and entertainment. Actually, in music, it's actually a great media for which non-binary individuals have blossomed, mainly Sam Smith, Christine and the Queens, or Demi Lovato. They recently came out as non-binary. Then there's the topic of sports, a very popular form of entertainment, but very, very controversial when it comes to transgender people. For a long time, transgender athletes were banned from competitions because they had an unfair natural advantage compared to cisgender athletes. So let's take the example of the Olympics to illustrate this. So in 2003, the Olympic Committee allowed transgender people to participate so long as they completely transition. 2 years of hormone replacement therapy and surgical transition. In 2016, those rules were relaxed, and there only needed to be, for transgender male athletes, basically anyone could compete, there wasn't any rules. And for transgender female athletes, their testosterone levels needed to be below a certain threshold. But actually, it's only in 2020 that the first transgender athlete was on the Olympics. And this person was Laura Hubbard. You've probably heard of her. She is a weightlifter for New Zealand. And actually, her case is very interesting because she did not win the competition. So she proves that, it's just because you put transgender athletes in competition doesn't mean they will win everything. She proves that. And below hormone levels and all of that medical talk, it's great to have non-binary representation in sports as well. In the 2020 Olympics, there was a non-binary soccer player playing for the female Canadian team. And in the 2022 Olympics, there is a non-binary pair figure skater playing for America, competing for America. As far as fashion goes, fashion has been riding the androgynous wave for quite a while already. But as far as actual representation goes, it's not quite there yet. But there are a few examples that can prove this wrong. Valentina Sampaio was the first transgender woman to walk a Victoria's Secret runway. Erin Rose Phillip is the first Black transgender disabled model to be signed with a huge modeling agency, and this is her at the Moschino Fashion Week last year. Kenny Ethan Jones is the first transgender male model to be included in a campaign for menstruation. And this is creator Gogo Graham. She wants to create clothes for people with her body type. And finally, I want to talk about the internet. I discovered that I was transgender at 15, which is considered quite late for my generation, actually, when I saw someone's coming out video on the internet, on YouTube. And I had never heard of that before. I didn't know what transgender was. I think I had a couple of arguments with some people on Twitter that were probably quite transphobic. And then I discovered what it really was. And I discovered that I myself was transgender. I think the internet gives way for various identities to express themselves without the constraint of mainstream media. Really, they can be themselves, share what they face without just being a character, just being themselves in their real life. Of course, there are many, many influencers that I could mention, but I made a small selection. Alec Denham is a non-binary activist who mainly talks about the gender binary and how it's all a social construct. Desmond is a non-binary teenager and drag queen who wants to educate other minors on transgender identities. And finally, probably the most famous here, Nikita Yeager. She's a beauty YouTuber, and she recently revealed that she transitioned before her career started. And actually, she got really, really great, feedback from her community, which is really empowering. To sum it up, there is uneven representation and inaccurate representation. But I think that there is a new wave of transgender models, actors, filmmakers, athletes, musicians, etc., who are joining the industry and will make a change in the future. I myself have managed to make myself a place in the modeling industry in Japan as transgender, both doing menswear and women's wear. And in the future, I'd like to be a filmmaker and include transgender narrative in possibly all of my movies. Not necessarily as the central storyline, but just one character. That's all it takes. Thank you very much for listening to me tonight.